My name is Jack, and I have been a sailor for many years. I have spent most of my life at sea, working on different ships, traveling across lakes and oceans. Now I am part of the crew on a cargo ship called Lake Superior Star. Our job is to transport goods from one port to another, making sure everything arrives safely. That morning, the weather was perfect. The sky was blue without a single cloud, and the sun shone brightly over the calm water. A light breeze touched my face as I stood on the deck, watching the waves move gently under the ship. The air smelled fresh, mixed with the salty scent of the lake. It was the kind of morning that made sailing feel peaceful and easy. Our ship was fully loaded with cargo, boxes of food, machinery, and other goods. The crew worked quickly to make sure everything was in place before we left. The captain, an older man with years of experience, stood near the helm, checking the navigation charts. He was a man of few words, but he always knew what to do. As the engines roared to life, I felt a familiar excitement. The ship slowly moved away from the dock, the city behind us growing smaller. Some of the crew leaned over the rail, waving to people on shore. Others stood in groups, chatting and laughing, looking forward to another routine trip. I took a deep breath and smiled. Sailing was never easy, but with good weather and a strong ship, there was nothing to worry about. At least that's what we thought. The first few hours of our journey were smooth. The ship moved steadily across the water, cutting through small waves as we followed our planned route. The sky was still bright, though a few gray clouds had started to appear on the horizon. No one paid much attention to them at first. After all, weather on the lake could change quickly, but it was usually nothing to worry about. Then, without warning, the wind picked up. The gentle breeze from the morning turned into sharp gusts, whistling through the ship's metal railings. The once calm waves grew larger, hitting the hull with more force. Dark clouds gathered above us, spreading fast like ink spilled across the sky. The sun disappeared, and in its place came an eerie darkness. I glanced towards the bridge, where the captain stood, his face tense as he studied the radar. A few moments later, he called out, his deep voice cutting through the rising wind. "A storm is coming, a big one." The crew exchanged nervous glances. We had all seen bad weather before, but something about the captain's tone made my stomach tighten. "Change course," the captain ordered. "We'll try to go around it." The helmsman adjusted our direction, but it didn't take long to realize the storm was moving faster than expected. The wind howled louder, and raindrops began to fall. Light at first, then heavier, until it felt like the sky itself was crashing down on us. The waves grew monstrous, rising high and slamming against the sides of the ship. Each impact sent violent shudders through the deck. I gripped the railing, my knuckles turning white. Crew members rushed back and forth, securing loose equipment and checking the cargo. Then came the worst wave yet. A towering wall of water rose in front of us, blocking everything else from view. It crashed over the bow, drenching the deck and nearly knocking us off our feet. I coughed, wiping water from my face, as the ship groaned under the force. Lightning flashed across the sky, followed by an earth-shaking boom of thunder. For the first time, real fear crept into my mind. We were no longer in control. The storm had taken over. The storm raged on, growing stronger by the minute. The waves were no longer just high. They were monstrous. The ship was like a toy in a child's hands, tossed into the air and slammed back down with brutal force. Every time we hit the water, the entire vessel shuddered, metal groaning under the strain. I held onto the railing, my body aching from the impact of each wave. Rain pounded against my face, making it hard to see. The wind screamed in my ears, drowning out the shouts of the crew. I turned toward the bridge, where the captain stood gripping the controls, his jaw clenched tight. Then it happened. A deafening boom echoed through the ship, followed by a violent jolt that nearly threw me off my feet. The entire vessel lurched to one side. Crew members stumbled, some falling hard onto the slick, rain-soaked deck. "What was that?" someone yelled. I forced myself to move, my heart pounding. Had we hit something? That didn't make sense. There was nothing but open water around us. But as I ran towards the lower deck, I felt a deep, unnatural tremor in the ship's body. Something was very wrong. Reaching the cargo hold, I saw several crew members already there, their faces pale. Water was rushing in, fast. "There's a breach in the hull," one of them shouted over the storm. I stared in horror. A massive crack had split open the lower part of the ship, and icy lake water was flooding in, swirling around our ankles, then our knees. The pumps were already running, but it was useless. The water was coming in faster than we could remove it. "We need to seal it," another crew member yelled. "Find something, anything." We grabbed whatever we could, wooden planks, metal sheets, even thick ropes, trying desperately to slow the flood. But the ship moaned again, tilting further. The breach was too big. The water was winning. Above us, thunder roared, lightning flashing in jagged streaks across the sky. The ship shuddered violently, tilting even more. I could see the fear in my crewmates' eyes. And then, in the back of my mind, a terrifying thought formed. We're not going to make it. The ship was sinking. Water had already filled the lower decks, and the once mighty Lake Superior star groaned like a wounded beast. Every few seconds, another violent wave slammed against the hull, tilting the ship further. The deck beneath my feet was no longer stable. It felt like standing on a crumbling cliff, ready to collapse at any moment. The captain's voice rang out over the storm. "Abandon ship! Get to the lifeboats!" The order sent a jolt of fear and urgency through the crew. Everyone scrambled to put on life jackets, pushing toward the lifeboat stations. I fumbled with the straps, my fingers trembling, my breath ragged. This wasn't a drill. This was real. But even as we reached the lifeboats, I knew something was wrong. The storm was too strong. The first lifeboat was lowered, but before it even touched the water, a massive wave struck. In an instant, the boat flipped upside down, throwing the men inside into the raging lake. They disappeared beneath the surface. My stomach twisted. Another crew member tried releasing the second boat, but the wind had turned into a furious, unstoppable force. The cables snapped like twigs, sending the lifeboat crashing into the side of the ship before being swallowed by the waves. "Get back!" someone shouted. "It's too dangerous!" But where could we go? The ship was sinking fast. The bow was already dipping below the waterline, and the stern was lifting unnaturally high into the air. We were running out of time. I grabbed the railing, my knuckles white as I stared at the black, churning water below. The wind screamed in my ears and rain struck my skin like needles. Around me, some men were praying, others were shouting for help, even though no one was there to hear. And then, a sickening creak. The ship groaned one final time before tilting sharply. I lost my footing, my body sliding across the slippery deck. I clawed for anything to hold on to, my hands finding a rope tied to the mast. I gripped it with all my strength as the ship leaned further and further. I looked up, locking eyes with the captain. He stood near the bridge, unmoving, his expression unreadable. He wasn't leaving. I wanted to call out to him, but before I could, the ship lurched again. My fingers burned as the rope tore through my grip. I fell backward, my body tumbling towards the freezing, endless water. The last thing I heard was the ship's final, shuddering breath before it disappeared into the depths. The ship was gone. One moment I was clinging to the deck, fighting to stay above water. The next I was falling into the endless black abyss. The freezing water hit me like a hammer, knocking the air from my lungs. My body went rigid with shock, every nerve screaming as the cold wrapped around me like chains. I kicked, struggling to reach the surface, but the lake had other plans. The ship's massive weight had created a vortex, a swirling black hole of water that pulled everything down with it. I was caught in its grip, spinning helplessly, dragged deeper and deeper. I thrashed against the force, but my movements were useless. The lake was stronger. The storm was louder. The cold was sharper. My chest burned. My vision blurred. I thought of my family, my mother's warm smile, my father's strong hands, the laughter of my little sister echoing in the summer air. I thought of my friends, of the long nights spent under the stars, of the quiet moments when life felt simple and safe. I wanted to go back. I wanted one more sunrise, one more breath of fresh air, one more chance to stand on solid ground. But there was no way back. The darkness grew heavier. The cold numbed everything. My body stopped fighting. As the last bubbles of air escaped my lips, I let go. And then, nothing. The lake had taken me.